And indeed, we are live on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. And imagine if we were not all in our separate spaces. We do this coming together as women for ages have come together at the kitchen table or the dining room table to just talk and free our souls and talk about what's going on in our lives and in the world. And in that, we solve mostly all of the world's problems as women have been doing for ages. And so I'm very happy to be in this sacred space with some phenomenal women and some women that I look up to. Um, and happy Black History Month. Yeah. And I was saying earlier, this is the month that we applaud and acknowledge and hail and worship and adore, particularly all of the Black women that have carried us through so many trials and tribulations and have brought us to many victories and triumph. And so I think that's what makes this kitchen table so special when we can come together. Sister Kara, who are these other beautiful ladies that are in this space with us today?
Yes, I am going to actually open up for each of our folks joining us today to introduce themselves. And I'll start with Miss Kiana Dickinson.
Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Kiana Dickinson. I am formerly the chair of the Arizona African American Caucus, former political director for the Arizona Democratic Party, and currently the national political director for the National Organization of Women.
Wonderful. Exciting to have you back as always.
Thank you.
And Dr. Jeray Peaton.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I have a lot of former positions as well. I'm currently retired, but I was formerly the state representative for Legislative District 4, which is now Legislative District 23. I'm a lifelong educator, having been a teacher, assistant principal, construction manager, and I retired from education as a school superintendent. And now I'm primarily the grandmother of 9 grandchildren. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you both for joining us today. We're going to dive right in and just start having this conversation. And I'm sorry, Reverend Dr. Bernadine Lewis, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Nope, you just did it. I'm just here. I'm just here to enjoy the conversation. And today I just want to listen and learn and observe. I really do. And whoever's here, I'm happy. I always feel like whoever shows up, that's who's supposed to be here. And I know that these are two political minds that I highly esteem and respect. So I'm just anxious um, for us to delve into this conversation. Doesn't answer who I am. But anyway, I'm just happy to be here.
Yes, thank you. And for you and anyone in our audience today as well, this is an open conversation. When we have these kitchen table talks, it's a time for us to just get together, sit at the kitchen table, and have a conversation about something that's going on. So we invite our audience to join us with any questions that you have that we are happy to bring into this conversation as well. What we're focusing on today is the promise from President Biden to nominate the first Black woman Supreme Court justice. It's a promise that he made during his campaign. It's a promise that he recently stated he has every intention of upholding as he comes to that nomination. We've started to see various lists coming out now of who those candidates or who that candidate may be. And we're also starting to see the pushback to that conversation in terms of questioning qualification, questioning why this is even necessary and what it means to America's justice system to make this move. So the first question that I want to open up with is one that I think a lot of folks are thinking about when it comes to this conversation, and particularly the pushback. It's why do Americans have such a hard time talking about equity, especially when it comes to Black women? And I will throw that to Dr. Peden first.
Okay, we're having sound difficulties. Could you repeat the question? There's a lot of feedback on you.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the question is, why do Americans have such a hard time talking about equity, especially when it comes to Black women?
Okay, I heard most of that. Why do people have such a hard time? I think is the root of it all is racism. I mean, this country was, as we know, founded with racial inequities, and they continue to perpetuate through today. And it's amazing to me that the more they try to dispel, ignore, and pretend that racism doesn't exist, with particularly with banning all the books and what have you, it's the more they show that we are entrenched in racist ideologies. So I just think it's just, I mean, and the news has been showing the past reactions to when a president promised to appoint a woman or whatever. And there has never been any problems with it until we get to a Black woman. And now all of a sudden they try to come up with all this new criteria that attacks the Black woman, which is totally uncalled for. And it's just it just, to me, it highlights the hypocrisy of it all. I mean, especially when the last Supreme Court, when Amy Coney Barrett was appointed in 21 days. And I mean, the hypocrisy is just everlasting. It seems to never end, and there is no shame in how they express that hypocrisy and racism. So I hope that answers your question, but I was having a sound problem on my end. So I'd like to hear what Kiana has to say. Thank you.
I agree with Dr. Peden, and I'm going to add a little piece to that. I think part of the unwritten concept of America is that for anyone to win, everyone else has to have less, which is false. There is enough for everyone to have everything that we want. That is the true theoretical version of what America is supposed to be. It has turned into, in order for one person to succeed, that means there's less than. So what for everyone else? So what I feel like, to Dr. Peden's point, is what we're seeing is when we say for equality purposes that we want a Black woman on the Supreme Court, what the rest of the country hears, which is not the words that were said, which, what do you mean? What about me? What about me? There's less of something for me. If I elevate this one particular type of person, then there is less of something for me, that I will be subjugated to the thoughts of another person. And I don't want that. And that always seems to happen when it comes to Black women. Whenever Black women are elevated, whether it is in our personal jobs, whether it's in education, whatever it is, there's someone somewhere who's going to ask them. Sometimes they say it out loud. Sometimes the quiet is spoken. Well, how did they get there? Well, in that, how did they get there should be a comma that says, and not me, because that's really what that means. So for whatever reason, we tend to believe, and when I say we, I mean the whole collective we, not the we's that are on this call today. that when somebody else has something, it means there is less for the rest of us. So inherently, that then means that we have a racist system, because the division that has always been used amongst us is by race. The choice ranking that we have in this country, whether we want to admit it or not, has always been by race. And it was the assumption that those who found this place had more value and more accountability and ownership of it than those who actually owned that place. And that is geographically, or the people who purposed to be in a certain position as well.
You know, I'm sorry, did you have something that you wanted to add, Miss Bernadine?
I think I have another question based upon what our two sisters put out there. But go ahead. What were you about to say?
Well, I was about to dive into a recent quote from Ted Cruz. So if you would like to ask your question first, we can go right into it.
Well, I mean, are our European American brothers and sisters, are they upset by a black woman and threatened, or if it were just another black person or person of African descent in general that would have raised this concern?
I actually don't think, I think if we start ranking the issues and what brings them to such concern, I actually think race is in the top 5, but I don't think it's the top 1. I think the top 1 is a lack of power. I think that the other party, the Republican Party, is feeling what is happening in the world and the change that is happening to a more people-centered economy, a people-centered environment, a people-centered society that leaves very little space for old power structures. And they are feeling that in a way that they believe that they are losing their opportunity to have the power that they once so loved and adored. And this is not new. I think it began some time ago. I think it began with our first African-American president. I think it began when they made a declaration upon his inauguration that we're not going to help this man do anything. And I think it continues on through his vice president, who is now president, that they are feeling that their power and their control slipping away. And they are using the thing that fears those that are not in power the most, which is race, to do that.
Well, and it really seems to reflect that sense of fear of a loss of power, or a fear of seeing that shift in this potential move from one group having all of the power to any other group having even a bit of it. And to that end, let's talk about this quote from Senator Ted Cruz. Of the potential for this nomination, he made the statement, "The fact that President Biden is willing to make a promise at the outset that it must be a Black woman, I got to say that's offensive. Black women are what, 6% of the United States population? He's saying to 94% of Americans, I don't give a damn about you. You are ineligible." I guess the question is, I think there's obvious problems with that statement. So I guess for those who might not see the problem with that statement, or might be confused as to why a statement like that is so problematic, can we talk about what Senator Cruz is perhaps not quite so visibly saying, or what he's missing in the conversation when he makes a statement like that.
Dr. P, I'm gonna let you go ahead and start with that one. I got to get my thoughts together on that.
Gee, I was hoping you would kick it off. Honestly, following Ted Cruz, I can't think of any intelligent statement he has made in the last few years. And everything he says is just absolutely appalling, with no basis of rhyme or reason or truth. Although we may be a small percentage, we are mighty, and we support and carry the presidential candidates through to election, and they are successful. So Black women are powerful, and the fact that I think we have heard quoted ad nauseum this week about the number of white males who have been on the Supreme Court since the beginning, hundreds of them. And just, maybe 30 years ago, Clarence Thomas came on, but he's a non-entity whatsoever. And so now I just think it's equity. And the fact that he doesn't see that this is equity and the right representation for the population of our country is ridiculous. I mean, is if to say there are no Black women. Yes, we're here, and we're going to always be here, and we should be represented from the highest courts to the lowest courts, and that is our right. And anyone who is trying to create a just society would want everybody to be represented, and Black women are certainly a main part of that calculation. So, and I just think that they said such dumb things. The one about the cruise catalog, these women don't know the difference between a law book and a cruise catalog. That's insulting. Not only is it insulting to us, it's insulting to them, for them to reveal that level of stupidity on their part. It's almost like, how can you let that come out of your mouth? Because we all know that anytime a Black person is in any high-ranking position, we are overqualified. You wouldn't even get your foot in the door if you weren't 120% qualified. And so all of these women who've been nominated and who are being considered, we look at their resumes and their experience and their background, and we know that they're overqualified. And I think that they are, it's almost like sour grapes or something. They're just saying what they're saying to try to not make themselves look so stupid. But in the long run, they're just digging themselves into a hole that they can never get out of, because still we rise. Thank you. Kiana, what do you have to say?
I think number one, first of all, let Black women decide what we are insulted by. We are quite articulate in determining our insult and attributing it to where we need to attribute it to. Secondly, as a man that has a wife and daughters that he talks about quite regularly, that would be that insulting to other individuals' wives and other individuals' daughters, says more about him as a man and his feeling of inferiority of the power of women, first and foremost, and then the power of Black women. So I think that in and of itself negates everything that this man has had to say, specifically when it comes to women. I say this quite frequently. The very first feminist I ever knew was my father, because he had two daughters that he had the audacity to raise to believe they could absolutely do, be, and say whatever they wanted to do, be, and say, as long as they carried themselves with respect. There is no way in the world that my father would make such a horrific statement about someone else's wife or someone else's daughter, because he understands the power that women, someone who brought two women into this world, have and what they can do. I would feel that the people of Texas need to start taking a very close look at their representation, because he clearly, not only does he not represent the Black women in his state or the Black people in his state, but he clearly doesn't respect or represent the women in his state as well.
You know, as I was reading these quotes from Senator Cruz, who also went on to make the statement that you're seeing on the screen, that it's actually an insult to Black women to have this nomination promised. I just have to question, do we think that statements like this are actually the views of these senators and legislators who are making them? Or is this indicative of the sort of deeper problem of the political party divide and the idea that they might think that they are towing the party line, and the assumption that this is the view that the party wants to hold? Because we're already seeing this issue creating that strong seam of division just with this promise of a nomination between those who are making statements like Senator Cruz and those who, at least on the surface level, are coming back and saying, oh, no, that's not what we want to represent. That's not the view of the party. And certainly it's a good thing for this to be happening. It's beyond time for it to be happening. So what's really happening in these statements?
Well, I personally think that, not personally, I think just from watching the current data, we are in a period of gaslighting. And I think that they are constantly coming up with these statements like this to make us believe what they're saying, when in fact that they know that is not true. But if they, just like with the other tactics that have been tried, if you repeat it often enough and loud enough, eventually you'll try to turn a lie into the truth. So luckily, we know, just as Kiana said, we know who we are, and we know what we are, and we know what we stand for, and you cannot tell us any different. So it's just gaslighting, and that has, I think, is a period of gaslighting. I see it constantly as a constant tactic of trying to flip lies into the truth, and we just have to be aware of that and fight it off.
And to add to Dr. Peaton's point, I don't even think that they're trying to gaslight us. I don't think that the audience is Black people or Black women. I think they are gaslighting members of their own party. I think they are presenting a truth that is not truth, but to your point, they say it repeatedly enough so that other people start parroting this same language. I don't think that they believe it. I think they are appealing to a base who they believe to be ignorant, who they believe to be sheep, who they believe who will just follow these tropes and these, antiquated thoughts about people just simply because they say it. We are not the audience. We are the subject, but we are not the audience. They are really trying to hold on to those individuals in their own party who, quite frankly, the way they operate demonstrates a disdain for the people in their own party, as if Republicans are not suffering from COVID, as if Republicans are not suffering from job losses. They have all the same issues that every Black, Latino, Native American person has, but for whatever reason, they tend to believe that that's an other people problem. That's not a they problem. So they are filling their head with notions to get them to behave in a way which their own life reflects the same thing that we're dealing with and all other marginalized communities are dealing with. I completely agree they are gaslighting, but we're not the target of it, we're the subject. And people once again need to pay attention to their own party because they are being taken advantage of by their own leadership.
So much of this conversation is really tied into this idea of of controlling the narrative and rewriting the story of America. You know, right now we're having this conversation about America being in a place of racial reckoning. And yet it's the same racial reckoning that we've been having since 1865, since 1965, since 2005, and now into 2022. Uh, we're having conversations around critical race theory. We're having conversations that suggest that Black women should be insulted by their own representation. Um, we're having these questions of who is and who is not qualified. So what's happening here? Why is there this focus on that feeling the need to rewrite the reality that we're living in a way that helps to maintain power, that denies that that power is attempting to be held on to? Um, and more importantly, what do we do about it? How do we open the eyes of ourselves and of others to the truth behind what's happening right now?
Kiana.
I think I saw an interview not too long ago where the interviewer asked a woman, a Caucasian woman, why she was so upset about quote unquote critical race theory. And she said because she didn't want her children to feel bad about what their ancestors did. I think that was the truth being told, the quiet being said out loud once again. I think the reckoning is coming because the young people who have grown up with diverse classrooms, who have grown up with Black people as teachers, Latino educators, Native Americans as educators, LGBT members as educators, they don't have the stigma that their parents taught them to have. And they are going home and they are questioning their parents. And their parents are feeling bad. Their parents are feeling a type of way about this. So they don't want to have a very difficult conversation with their children about the ancestry of where their grandmas and great grandmas got this money or got this wealth or this privilege. They are feeling away. It's not us, because our ancestors, our grandmas and great grandmas were very clear about how we got to this point as a means of not only teaching us our strength and our history and our courage and perseverance, but also to keep us safe. But they were not taught. This is not about, we have never been on the menu. So I think it's almost a point that we have to remember, oh, this isn't even about us. This is about them feeling bad. This is about their children. I can say my kids have grown up in a very diverse community where they've had Black teachers, they've had best friends of every ethnicity, shade, shape, color. So they don't have the same thoughts that their grandparents did. But now I'm quite sure that those white children have some questions about some things. And they are learning via TikTok. They are learning via Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And when they go to speak to their families doesn't know what to say. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to address it. So therefore, everybody has to stop talking about it because I don't know what to say about it. That's their own shame. That's not a shame that we should carry. We didn't do it. We were subjected to it, but we didn't do it. And those conversations should be had. So they want to stop it in the classroom. You will not stop knowledge. You will not stop people in their desire to learn about where they come from, even if it is not so fun, even if it is hard to swallow. Yes, more than likely, quite a few people's families were slave owning individuals, and that's something that you're going to have to deal with within your family structure. Just like in our families, we have to deal with the atrocities that were committed to our ancestors, and we have to deal with that. The best thing I've ever heard was if, our kids can be subjected to racism, your kids can learn about it.
So true. I agree with that. That's on point. One thought I've had about this whole thing. I remember being 8 years old in third grade in Newark, New Jersey, and I was part of the Great Migration from the South. So when we got to Newark, we were the minority. Most, it was a mixed neighborhood. Most of the kids were white, and then that subsequently began the white flight. But I remember sitting in that third grade classroom, and whenever that teacher said something about Africans or our ancestry or whatever, it was always derogatory. I would wish that the floor would open up and I could disappear because they made it so. And then of course, and that's still true today. Whenever, if you're in a classroom, you say anything about African Americans, whatever, and there's one African American kid in the class, everybody looks at that child. And so, you know, just to reflect on all of that, my question to them, so I have been forced, and we have all been forced to be educated in a hostile, uncomfortable environment for all of our education. I've had that uncomfortable feeling from grade school right through graduate school. And so we have always been uncomfortable about the way that our history is depicted and told. And the horrible part about it is they leave out all the good stuff. I wish that I had known about the women who charted the astronauts when I was in third grade, instead of about being depicted as savages running through the jungle or something. But and our history, and that's part of the critical race theories. That's one of the tenets, that history is twisted, distorted. They leave out what they want to leave out. It's like cherry picking. We'll tell you what we want you to hear, but we won't tell you the other part. And that has been our history since the beginning of time. I mean, if you recall that when there were slave uprisings in the Caribbean or whatever, they did not want the African Americans here in America to know about the uprisings that was going on in other parts of the world. So that was shut out. They have always tried to distort history so it makes them look good and make us look bad. So now, one thing I have always fought for is that history does need to be revised, but it needs to be revised and told in an honest, authentic manner, comprehensive. Everybody, include the good, the bad, and the ugly. Don't just pick out parts that you like and leave the parts that you don't like, because that's not a true representation of history. And I hope we get to a point where everybody can see themselves in our history and not feel bad about it, but just know that this is the truth being told. So we have a long way to go.
Certainly do. And part of this conversation that we keep coming back to is the need to have these difficult conversations, to have the uncomfortable conversation about the realities of American history and its engagement of and interactions with and dismissals of people of color, Indigenous brothers and sisters, Black people, those of Hispanic and Latino and Latina descent, just anyone who stands outside of the perceived norm, which tends to favor white supremacist ideologies, is seen as being too uncomfortable to have that conversation. So I guess my question here is, what is so dangerous about discomfort? What makes that such an impossible conversation for us to have?
Accountability. Mm-hmm. Difficult conversations would require someone to be accountable, someone to hold you accountable, and for you to take accountability. And that's what I think makes it so dangerous, is they do not want to say. I've been a part of conversations where it was uncomfortable for me, but a random white person wanted to have a conversation and talk about and apologize for what their ancestors did. That was very uncomfortable for me because that was an unwanted, uninvited conversation, right? That I didn't want, but that was what they needed to do. My response was, I am happy that you are clearing your soul, but that's your soul's work. That's not my soul's work. And you have to hold yourself accountable for your family. And that's where we are. Nobody wants to admit that their family profited off of the enslavement of another group of people. However, and yet, that is the truth. And to be perfectly honest, it was not all white people. There were people of other ethnicities that also participated in that as well. It's Black History Month, so let's tell the truth. And everyone is going to have to atone for their own family's responsibility as equally as they are able to profit or use the capital of their privilege. They also have to atone for the things that their family did or didn't do.
Dr. Peaton, any of your thoughts on this?
I agree perfectly with what Kiana has said. And it is accountability, and what makes you uncomfortable is accountability and also facing the reality, being real and true to yourself. You have to tell yourself that what is being said is the actual truth. And have some hope, have some reflection or remorse or whatever for it. But that's what makes you uncomfortable, because a lot of people live in denial. You know, they want to deny that there's COVID or deny that there's racism or, you know, like when I tell people the racism that I experience here in Arizona, white people will say, "What racism? What are you talking about?" And I say to them, you know, you don't walk in my footsteps, so you would never experience what I've experienced. But they deny that is happening. It's like, oh, I don't know why you would say that. So it's actually opening your eyes and taking the blinders off and facing the reality. You know, it's like Pogo said, we've seen the enemy and the enemy is us. So it's them just trying, you know, they need to realize we all need to live in honesty, live with our eyes wide open, to be woke, and accept the reality of it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So,
you know, I love what you just said there about the difference in experience contributing to this as well. I've been in the midst of creating different webinars or conversations for different groups, specifically focusing on bias, and actually just had one canceled because it was going to be given in a state that just banned critical race theory being taught by anyone within the schools or a government agency or anything like that. And so the group decided, maybe we shouldn't have this conversation because we're facing thousands of dollars worth of fines if we have it. But part of that conversation was going to be focusing in on the different forms of invisible bias or unconscious bias, implicit bias, and specifically talking about attribution bias, that bias that says that because your experience is not mine, it can't be true. Or that tendency to have different rationales for my behavior versus that of someone else. And I think this would be a fantastic conversation for folks like Senator Cruz to be part of, in understanding that you saying that 6% of Black women is not worth representing in the legislature is not problematic, because you're saying that your head is in the right place when you're saying that, and yet President Biden is racist or problematic for saying that they should be represented. That's a form of attribution bias, and it's part of the ongoing conversation that we're certainly in the midst of right now. So if we can just keep talking about that for a little bit, because we see this strong difference and this strong divide between the narratives that we're comfortable talking about and the narratives that we're not comfortable talking about. On one hand, when it comes to certain aspects of history, we are very quick to say, never forget. We can't erase that history. We have to remember what happened so we don't repeat it. And yet when it comes to the history of Black people in this country, it's always, it's time to let it go. You need to move on. Why are you held up and still talking about this? It doesn't matter anymore. Or the accusation that in trying to remove the symbols of white supremacy or racism, we are trying to erase history that for some reason needs to be maintained, even though we don't want to talk about the problem of what that is maintaining. So if I had to put that into a question, I guess my question would be, what do we need our brothers and sisters in other communities to recognize or realize about the danger of those sorts of conversations? The danger of asking us to forget because it makes them uncomfortable to remember.
I would almost point to the January 6th insurrection as an example within their own community of what happens when you choose to forget history. You are then subject to it. This was a group of individuals that used historic ideologies as a weapon to undermine an election because they didn't like it. That is what happens when you forget your history. That is what happens when you forget where you come from. The fact that we are still in a place where there's conversation, and I believe, was it this week, the RNC said that was legitimate political discourse, is laughable. And you almost say, you stop it, quit playing, just quit. But that's what happens. And this is the start of a place where if you can deny an actual insurrection, you are opening the floodgates to repeat a history, which you would then argue, is that what y'all were trying to do? Is that what you're trying to go back to? Is that the great again space that you're trying to get us back to, the place where they could do these types of things like the Civil War and it was okay? That I think that is where we need to draw people back to their own history to get them to understand it, because to your point, they tend to other us, right? Your experience is your experience. It's an attribution all to you and of itself. Has nothing to do with the rest of us, except what we just saw in January of last year was y'all. That was y'all's reckoning with y'all. That was not us. That was people in your own community, in your own ancestry, people that looked like you, reflecting back to you what happens when you do not pay attention and do something about your own history and just sweep it under the rug.
So true. I think it's quite appropriate that this is Black History Month. And I think that that should make us pause and realize the fact that most of us, I know my generation, we were not taught African-American history. There was never a course in K-12 or grad school that had anything to do with African-American history. And I think since the beginning of our landing on this continent, 1619, there has always been an attempt to make us forget our history. Going back to Kunta Kinte, and roots. Forget your name, forget your religion, forget your language, forget. They don't want you to remember. They don't want you to realize the majesty from which your people actually were abducted from. So to me, that's an indication. It's just like these books that are being banned. Gee, I think I should read that book. It kind of highlights the importance of it. If you think it's so horrible that I know this history, evidently I need to know it. But that whole, once again, to use the term of gaslighting and just trying to make us forget and not realize that this is a reality, that has always been part of our history. Like in 1870, when Reconstruction started, and they started with the Black codes and the Black law. All of those things were done to suppress us and to make us realize or make us feel powerless. But the beauty of all that never took place. I don't think we ever truly felt powerless, but the attempt was there to make us feel powerless, to make us feel separate, to make us believe the lie of separate but equal, that we should be relegated to apartheid like society. They have, I mean, the attempt has always been made to try to make us African American people feel less than and forget our history, forget our power, and to believe the lie that they're trying to tell us, that we are inferior in some way. And because they're trying so hard to make us believe that, we need to double down, try make sure that we know our history and we know our strength and we know our power and we know what we can do, and continue on. And then also to teach our children, those truths, those histories, and make them help them to always believe in themselves. Because honestly, if just looking out into society, I don't know. I have 4 grandsons, and just talking with them and trying to make them feel powerful, secure, but safe is quite a balance. Especially this week with Amir Locke being shot while sleeping. It's a fear that you can't forget. And it's really, truly hard to live with, but we need to always remember our power and our ability to survive. Thank you.
Thank you. Amen to all of that. I think all of this is so important, and it takes us back to this conversation about the qualification of Black women to serve as Supreme Court justices, because of all of these different conversations we're seeing that are attempting to reshape how we understand our current realities. Critical race theory is reverse racism meant to make white people feel bad. January 6th was legitimate political discourse. And it does not only apply to the Black community. If we look at the conversations that have been being held around the Indigenous schools, those were necessary. They were providing a necessary service. Really? In the slaughtering of Indigenous children and the denying of them of their history and their lives was somehow being recast as necessary of providing a good. So this is the importance of these conversations, and of really paying attention to what's going on and what's being said and what different people are trying to convince us of when it comes to those who have been othered by this nation, regardless of even their being the first peoples of this nation. So let's, sorry to soapbox a little bit there, but let's get back into the conversation of the Supreme Court nomination. I think in terms of connecting those two thoughts, I want to go to that question of qualification and competency that's surrounding this. It was very fascinating to me that as soon as the announcement was made that President Biden was planning to uphold that promise of nominating a Black woman, the statement started to be made that she's not qualified. You don't even know who she is. She is already unqualified to serve in this position. So the question is, what qualifies Black women to be heard in American society and in the justice system?
I don't think anything will, in the eyes of those who don't naturally believe that. I think I've had so many conversations in the past week to 10 days about the strong Black woman, right? And how it is time for us, we are worthy of rest. We have been strong for far too long, and we need a space to be soft when we so choose to. That is not usually afforded to us amongst the larger society. When we talk about a Supreme Court nominee who, if I'm not mistaken, the majority of the Black women that are on the short list are on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. These are highly accomplished women that come from the same pool that most Supreme Court nominees come from. They're in the same space. So they were qualified then, but they're not qualified now. Just like the thought of President Obama. Nobody paid a bit of attention to him when he was Senator Obama. There was no issue. There was no concern about where he was born. There was none of this when he was Senator Obama. It's when we choose to elevate above where they believe we should be that all of a sudden our qualifications are called into question. Yeah, no, I'm just not going to buy into that. And with ease, that Black woman, whoever she may be, should be confirmed, because we've seen the last two that were appointed and gone through the confirmation processes, which many believe were a complete joke. And for the fact that Black women have to be almost superhuman to be considered qualified, when mediocrity seems to be okay for others, we have to, that is an issue that they're going to have to deal with, because those women who are on that short list all deserve and are all worthy of being on that list, and any one of them would be an exceptional Supreme Court justice.
So true. And furthermore, they would not be on that list if they did not have the credentials and the experience to back it up. And when I say credentials, we know they have the credentials, or else they would not be there. And, I can speak from, and furthermore, I think one of the things is that those people are always trying to tell us where our place is. And if we stay in our place, and our place to make them feel comfortable, they're okay with that. But when we elevate ourselves, when we work really hard to get lucky, to get promoted to a position, then they start questioning it. When I was a principal and superintendent, people would come to the school district and say, well, I'd like to talk to the superintendent. And then my secretary would say, well, yeah, you can go, there's her office. And then they would look at me like, no, the superintendent of this. I mean, I go through like 3 questions. Or even when I was a principal, an insurance representative came to the school, and it took her a while to realize that I was a principal. And then she said the quiet part out loud. How did you get to be principal? So it's like they question but they don't know us. I don't think any Black woman would step into a space or an arena unless they were overqualified, and if they were prepared and they had all of the lived experiences to do that job. We would not be there. We don't put ourselves in places that we're not prepared to be. And that's just something that they don't know. But not only are we prepared, like I said, we're over prepared. So the fact that all of those women allow themselves to be nominated, they're prepared, they're qualified, they have every attribute that they need to be successful as a Supreme Court judge. So.
Ms. Bernadine.
I want to stir up some trouble. I'm not sure if this one is good trouble or bad. In thinking about a Black woman for Supreme Court justice, do we owe Sister Dr. Anita Hill that seat?
Wow.
You stirring up trouble.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. She didn't make the list, though. She's not even on the list.
No, I know, but considering the drama, the incident between now President Biden.
Mhm.
I just wonder, why has it that why aren't we giving consideration to Sister Dr. Hill?
I think we might be making a bit of an assumption that she wasn't considered and she didn't turn it down. Because Dr. Peden used some very important language that the women on that list allowed themselves to be nominated. Let's not forget that we don't have to accept what's given to us, even when it sounds like it's prestigious, right? And I think we might be making a slight assumption that she wasn't asked and she politely declined. We just don't know. And second, I would like, as a Black woman, a Black little girl that watched that entire hearing, because my dad had me watch the entire hearing, I would hope that she is at least asked her thoughts and her counsel. And I would hope that then Senator Biden, now President Biden, has a grown up conversation where he atones for his behavior during that trial. And I say it was a trial because she was under trial. That was not a hearing. She was under trial and accused and had to prove herself innocent about that time. Because what was done to her that little Black girls had to watch creates grown-up Black girls like me. That means that you will not do that to another Black woman again.
I also think that in her lived experience and wisdom and the respect for the position, she if she probably chose to keep the eye on the prize and not to, because if she were involved in the whole nomination process, it would spin out a whole nother ball of confusion. And I think that in her wisdom, she honors the position and the women who were nominated. She honors them enough to not step into that arena, because it would just throw it to a whole different realm. So
I want to share I'm sorry, Miss Bernadine. I wanted to share a quote from Al Sharpton, in which he was acknowledging this issue. He stated recently that Anita Hill was confronted and badgered by the Senate Judiciary Committee chair at that time, a senator from Delaware named Joe Biden. When Joe Biden decades later ran for president, he had to make amends with Anita Hill. Isn't it ironic to some that the man that helped in many ways disrespect a Black woman named Anita Hill now is going to put the first Black woman on the Supreme Court? I hope he invites Anita Hill to the ceremony to show how far you can grow if God gives you time. So I think that certainly is part of the conversation. Ms. Bernadine, I'm sorry to have cut in.
No, that was perfect. And I'm familiar with Reverend Sharpton making that. I'm always thinking, and I guess this is this is how I'm always thinking, how do we begin to bring healing to America? Because I definitely know where we are and where we have been in this epic story of America. But with the work the training and the work that I do and have been a part of, I have to look at both sides, whether we want to look at it or not. So I'm looking at our European American brothers and sisters and this particular conversation and where's the healing? How can we heal? Um, Do you think it would make a difference? Do we need to hear from Sister Doctor at this time? And do you think we need to publicly witness the sitting down, the coming together of now President Biden and Sister Dr. Hill in a conversation? Do we think that that would begin to bring about healing when it comes to our disrespect, and be it intentional or by his ignorance at that time? um, could it potentially bring about healing and set an example of what we need to be doing today and coming into a space to have these, and I choose to call them brave conversations, because it would take courage on both of their sides, from both of them, to set aside ego and come down and come together, and let us try to reason together. What do you think? What say you?
I think it depends on the first thing that came to mind is from a political standpoint is doing that would be wonderful and it would create so much discourse out in the world that it might be more traumatizing to have that happen, um, because we are not even in the same place as far as civility that we were then now. Um, and the comments might hurt and harm Dr. Hill again, in having that conversation. That's the first thing that came to my mind. The second thing is, I don't know if I'm particularly concerned with anyone else's healing but our community at this time around, just to be perfectly honest. I don't know that I am particularly concerned with that. I understand that a great healing will happen and I will be a part of it when it does. But at this particular moment, on this particular day, our community has so much healing to do in and of itself that I think that in conversations where we inadvertently center our European American sisters and brothers, we forget about our own healing in those spaces and start catering to theirs. And I'm not sure that I am in a place to be concerned about that right now.
I totally agree. That was my first thought first, that we need to begin by healing ourselves. To start by healing ourselves first. It's almost like what they tell you when you're flying on a plane, take care of yourself first and then you can take care of others. And that's exactly what I thought. Because right now we are fractured, we are hurt, and I think as a people, things that have occurred in our society of late, we're traumatized, and just grappling for ways to strengthen ourselves, strengthen our children, our grandchildren. And so, yes, let's heal ourselves first. Thank you.
And
Sorry.
don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'm for us first. And I guess in making that comment, maybe I was not clear, but definitely, and I just want to weigh in on that. Yes, I agree, the same thing. But at some point, I'm just thinking, how do we begin um, to heal together? Because as much as they have tried to keep us out of the us, the US, the us, we cannot in turn uh, we cannot do tit for tat. And although I do know that, and I know that I know that I know that the last shall be first. I do know that. And but I say that with also adding when that happens, um, those last who are and who will and are becoming the first cannot do tit for tat. And so it will have to be um, those people, hint, hint, um, being or establishing the new world as it was meant to be, and that was that everyone was to be seated at the table. So I do get that, but I just wondered if that, even that, having that type of uh, if having that to happen, if that would not perhaps bring healing amongst us as a people. Um, so I get it though, but I do agree that we do need healing amongst ourselves, and that is why we do this kitchen table. I think this is a way, and if more women could come together like this so that we could have these conversations, this is how the healing begins amongst ourselves and with each other.
I do think, Miss Bernadine, that a signal to our community that they were ready for that type of healing would be a full throated acknowledgement of their participation in our trauma, as well as fighting against some of the nonsense that we've talked about just on this conversation without us having to lead that conversation. If they could self correct within their own community, it would definitely be a signal and would, for me, open up my interest to wanting to participate in that conversation if I knew that there was some acknowledgement of their participation in what was happening.
Dr. Peaton, any closing thoughts from you in this conversation as we come to the top of our hour?
No, well, thank you for facilitating this. You poised some very intriguing and important questions to us to consider, and it's just been a great dialogue. And Dr. Bernadette, I agree that that conversation between Dr. Hill and Biden would be it would be incredible to listen to. But I also agree with Kiana that you putting her through a whole lot of trauma that she suffered already and is probably never recovered from. So, but this has been a great time to discuss some of these issues and realize that we all recognize that we are really living through some very troubled times, and that we need to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others, and that we can live and grow. Thank you.
Ms. Dickinson, any closing thoughts?
I think I just want to encourage all of us on the call, all the Black women listening, to try to live with some ease. We have overworked ourselves into unhealthy lifestyles and unhealthy achievement seeking, unhealthy relationships, just unhealthiness. And we don't have to do that. We can take some time to take care of ourselves, and rest is revolution, and we should acknowledge that, and for ourselves. And at some point, we might need to just turn off all of our social media for a while, turn off anything that's negative, turn off the news as they continue to repeat the story over and over again, because what it is doing to us, if you hear it, is chipping away at our esteem, at our confidence, and it is forcing us back into the thought that we are going to have to overwork just to achieve the minimum. So I encourage us to rest, to acknowledge each other. The amount of work that this group of women, the four of us that I know personally, that you all have done to be where you are, you deserve the entire month of February off, plus some. And I hope that you take it and just honor yourself with rest.
Well said.
Just for my own closing thoughts, and I want to then turn it over to you, Miss Bernadine, to close us out and end our session because you always do it so beautifully. But I just keep thinking of a recent conversation that a group of us had here locally, centering on, you know, elections and local politics and things that are happening. And the question was raised of the phrase that so often comes up for us for such a time as this. And the question was asked, is now the time? And in that conversation, I said yes. And in this conversation, I say yes, that now is the time for us to recognize that we are beyond the time to start healing the wounds we've allowed to fester within our community and in so many communities of color. This is the starting point of our healing. It's not only healing for Black women or Black people, because nothing that we do ever is only for us. It's for all of us. It's time for us to acknowledge the hurt and harm that's been done and perpetuated against our brothers. He allows that time for us to start putting Black women in places of power, not despite whether or not they are qualified, but because they are beyond qualified, and they have been for too long for us to keep ignoring it. And as Ms. Dickinson so beautifully put it, it is our time now as a Black community. It's beyond time for our healing to happen, and it's beyond time for other communities to allow that healing to start happening. So I encourage all of our brothers and sisters within our community and beyond our community to join us, if you dare, if you're willing, and if you're able to be part of that important conversation. Then we are willing to have you right there alongside us. Ms. Bernadine?
That's beautiful, Sister Kara. And so, as we come to the end of our kitchen table, which I hold these so dearly, um, may the Most High bless all of our people. But today, I want to just um, send out a special blessing to we as women of color. And I pray that the weights on Black women's plates are lightened, that instead our cups are filled to the brim with all of the joy and peace that our mere existence deserves. I pray that our arms raise music of our own hips, the metronome of our feet, the scores of our hums, that our laughs and snaps fuel the drumming of our hearts. I pray that we feel no need for the validation of those who are not our own, that we are constantly reminded of the prophetic nature of our own minds. I pray that we Black women feel at home in our own celebrations of majesty, that the love we offer ourselves and the world is shown back onto us by the sun and the moon and poured back into us by the hands we hold. I pray that Black women in this week and in this lifetime grant ourselves permission to settle into our own expansiveness, that we bestow upon ourselves the key that only we have held through time. I pray that most of all, that we find peace in our breath and power in our declaration. And so, with that being said, thank you all, beautiful sisters, for sharing this sacred space of our Lived Black Experience project. And to our viewers, our LBE family, wherever you may be, go in grace.